Hello all, this is the Owl, and as that last intro was indeed a tad long and yeah, I hear you about keeping the cultural tangents under control, but very quickly, before we start, let's get one thing out of the way. Volume 2 of Higurashi, marking the second half of the first arc, is where this manga turns from a really good small-town horror mystery into something genuinely game-changing. Forget scratching the surface, we've barely touched the surface thus far. And so, let me say this in advance. The end of this volume is quite something, and it's also going to be where those of you who haven't read this thing have what I believe is scientifically known as a hard WTF moment. So I am going to use this as an excuse to reiterate what I said in part 1. Rather than waiting for me to do part 3, go and buy this manga yourself and read it. Higurashi is a story that deserves more than to be represented by some daft 40-something content monkey nattering away on the YouTubes, and is best when approached on its own terms. Go and do it. This video will still be here when you're done. Okay. This is gonna be a long one, so let's dive on in. As always, we kick off Volume 2 with some wonderful color pages, recapping what happened previously, and then we rejoin Keiichi, who is thinking it all over and wigging himself out slightly over breakfast. He's pretty sure that Rena was listening in on his call with Oishi, and he is thus sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop and hit him on the head. Suddenly, the phone rings, and his mother tells him that Rena is here to pick him up for their walk to school. Meep. Now what the hell are you going to do? He tells his mother that he's feeling sick and won't be going to school, which, oh come on dude, why wasn't my mother this trusting? Hell, I'd have barely gone to school if the whole "oh, I'm feeling sick" gambit worked. Oh wait, she took him to the clinic to get medication and a shot. Yep, that would probably have worked on me. And I just realized something fun, and I will try to remember to bring it up when it's relevant. We then meet the affable Dr. Irie who, we will get to you later on too. Let's just say, people have mixed reactions to him, and, well, I'm pretty sure that my reactions are going to get mixed reactions. Regardless, I get it, and yeah, if you've read this thing, you probably know why. Again though, it's a knotty discussion, and thus one for later. And speaking of mixed reactions, Oishi picks Keiichi up and then takes him out for a chat at a local restaurant, you idiot. Or I guess you could describe it as, well, more accurately, it's a maid cafe called Angel Mort. Which, okay, mild tangent time, but this is really bloody interesting. Firstly, you may think it weird, a small village like this having a pretty nice and somewhat upmarket fancy costume-themed coffee and dessert place. And yes it is. But it's also a thing, and I do not know why. I mean, I remember our little village having, for some unknown bloody reason, one of the best French bistros in the prefecture about 10 minutes out of town. Seriously, you'd be galumphing out over the rice paddies and ding, there it is. A nondescript building that you wouldn't have looked at twice in passing. And somehow, it not only made enough money to stay open with about half a dozen full-time staff members, but the owner/chef drove an Audi R8, a vehicle that has always given me the happy pants and costs more than a new liver. Secondly, Angel Mort's name, and a lot of stuff here, does have a certain level of punnery in Japanese, but let's just say its name. Angel Death, or Dead Angel, is probably riffing on she, with angel being said as tenshi in Japanese, with shi meaning death, and if you completely ignore the kanji, you might say it as heavenly death, or perhaps even divine retribution. It's a reach, but a reach that I feel entitled to because there is going to be a certain resonance there. Thirdly, yes, it features costumed waitresses of an age as well as I guess a clientele of all ages, but let's not go there now. However, the uniforms are allegedly a reference to Leaf Fight, an obscure card game that 7th expansion made. Bizarrely, the design is incredibly iconic now, not only appearing in other Ryukishi properties, but other games and media and all of the cosplays even today. Fourthly, these sorts of costume-themed restaurants and maid cafes are a huge thing in Japan. Some of them also feature male servers, including male servers cross-dressing as female maids, I guess as opposed to male maids. Where the hell was I going with this again? Regardless, these venues are surprisingly popular, often with extensive wait times, but most often it's women in a costume of some kind, many of which can be vaguely kinky like catgirl or tanuki girl costumes, sometimes going as far as extensive makeup, as well as, ye old French maid, or even weird shit like pirate or zombie costumes. I may talk more about these in detail later because it's really bloody interesting. And finally, apparently Angel Mort is based on an actual restaurant called Jonathan's, but for the life of me, I have been unable to find it or even confirm its existence. If anyone knows where in Japan it would be, please let me know in the comments. Anyways, much like that time I accidentally saw bear porn, this next bit is where things get really, really hairy. So let's take a look. Sitting at a table together, it's interesting to note that despite Keiichi's initial impression, Oishi seems pretty affable today and is thoroughly enjoying Angel Mort, perving on the waitresses, not touching that one. Can we get an "Oh Japan" for the audience? But they do start discussing what might be going on here. Oishi emphasizes that despite the whole demon thing, and the whiff of the supernatural about these murders, the curse of Oyashiro is emphatically human shenanigans, made to appear as a curse, likely to inspire fear and discourage future disloyalty towards the village. Oh, and this is bad. The villagers would, in deep history, select someone to be killed, presumably for, okay, just say it, and to make it appear as if Oyashiro was punishing traitors. This someone would be isolated, stalked, and finally murdered. Even more alarming, it was strictly forbidden for anyone else to interfere with this ritualized murder, with the implication being that interference would be met with a similar punishment. Do take note here though, Keiichi, likely in order to reconcile his love for his friends with what he saw in terms of Rena transforming and the horrible murders, has started to seriously consider a supernatural explanation for what's been going on. Oishi says that, due to Keiichi's interest in Satoshi as an anomaly, as well as a connection to his friends, he has actually had them investigated, by them obviously meaning the quartet of girls, and things got very odd very fast. The damn project director, the first victim, had directly scuffled with Mion shortly before he was attacked and dismembered, presumably by a mob of angry villagers led by her family. The married couple who fell off the cliff, but let's be real here, were more likely pushed, happened to be, Satako's parents, and the dead priest and his wife were Rika's caregivers. Rena does not seem to be directly connected with the victims, but is a weird anomaly herself, and let's keep that counter going. This will all be both very useful to figuring out the mystery provided, as long as you're able to think the right way and also remember it for later. Patterns, my dear Watson, always look for patterns. While Rena lived outside of Hinamizawa, remember, as confirmed by Mion, she was born here but left and returned. She became, is there a better word than delinquent? I think there is, but it escapes me. Let's just say she was bad news, including an incident where she smashed all of the windows at her school, apparently out of sheer malicious devilment. She even got put under house arrest, not something I've actually heard of happening in Japan, as being sent to a reform school is far more likely even now. This led to Rena being diagnosed with, the translation says dysautonomia, which I'm not a doctor, but either the translation is funny or the doctors were off the mark. My guess is that they're describing some sort of ODD or other behavioral disorder, but okay, sure, it was the 80s. Maybe. Regardless, she's on meds, but, and yes, this is pretty damn eerie. Apparently, during her counseling sessions, she would describe a dreadful being, Oyashiro-sama himself, that would come to her bed and look down at her. Yeah, no thank you. They leave without any solid conclusions, and Oishi warns Keiichi that every instinct he has as a detective is screaming at him that Keiichi will now be targeted himself and will have to tread exceedingly carefully. Not enough for, some sort of police escort or even a guard, I guess, or hell, talking to his parents and leaving this cursed fucking town in the dust. Yeah, I know, story got a story, and there's a bit more to this, but it's always rubbed me up the wrong way, because if I were a cop and relying on a teenage boy to help me investigate a village-wide murder cult that may in fact have a supernatural twist, I would have the heavy squad on speed dial at the very least. And this next bit, oh yeah, now we're into the good stuff. By which I mean, it's time we transitioned from slow burn mystery to outright nut-wrinkling, butthole puckering, ovary tightening horror. And holy crap, I wish I could read some of this again for the first time. Enjoy, you lucky bastards. That evening, Keiichi lies in bed, thinking it all over, listening to the rasp of the cicadas outside, before he heads downstairs and sees a note from his parents, saying that they're going out. He's still a bit shaken after the revelation that his awesome friends seem to either have a connection with the victims of the curse, or in Rena's case, a very strange and dark history belied by her happy-go-lucky nature. It's honestly a credit to both artist and writer here that they never shy away from this aspect of the story. Keiichi both looks and feels completely lost, and the psychological toll this is all taking on him is captured absolutely beautifully. There's a knock at the door, and yikes, speak of the the evil village deity thing. It's Rena and Mion. This cannot be good. Turns out they stopped by to check in on him, as he was absent from school that day, and while he tries as hard as possible to act normal, he cannot help but feel uneasy and read dark intent into what they say. They give him some ohagi, a traditional Japanese sweet, think somewhere between mochi and a rice cake, generally made with anko, or sweet bean paste. It's emphatically not my thing. I find anko in general nasty and ohagi rather sickly. Honestly, while I like Japanese food as a whole, Japanese confectionery kind of doesn't work for me. They tell him that it was made by Mion's grandmother, but Rena made one herself and challenges Keiichi to figure out which one is hers as his penalty for missing their club today. Yeah, that doesn't bode well. Mion then steps in close, saying that, well, he doesn't look sick, and that's for the best, as there's one thing they want to ask him. Oh crap. Suddenly, both of them transform, gaining those awful, slit-pupilled eyes, and they ask him what exactly he ate for lunch that day. Yeah, why did you eat out in public with Oishi in a village that you believe is watching you and plotting to kill you specifically for being a nosy Nelly, and now they have seen you literally telling tales out of school, you absolute pillock. He hedges. How the hell could they know? They were in school, right? Are you kidding me, mate? But sure enough, they go on to reveal that they know a lot more than they are letting on. I think the implication is that someone just told them, saying that he apparently ate out with a tough-looking man. You absolute prat. This is where you should be leaving town as fast as possible, because there is now a definite implied threat here, especially with Mion saying that he needs to remember that she sees everything. They leave him absolutely sweating bullets, but as they do, she turns, looks right at him through the crack in the door, and says that he'd better come to school tomorrow. Holy crap! See what I mean? Keiichi occasionally having a case of the terminal stupids aside, that entire sequence was masterful, as well as being, let's be honest here, scary as balls. Damn it, I love this manga. There is just this feeling of ever-escalating menace and threat as the noose slowly tightens around Keiichi's throat, and his friends become more and more threatening, but never in a way he can call them out on or report on. Anyways, he realizes what marked the turning point for him though. Tomitake running into him at the dump and starting him down this path towards investigating and uncovering Hinamizawa's true nature. Tomitake wasn't just killed for being an outsider, he was killed for opening his big fat mouth about things that were not his business. Keiichi will likely be next, then Oishi, unless maybe there's a possibility that if he backs off now, all will be forgiven and he can just slot back into his old life. Plug back into the Matrix, you know. Wait, how many people are even going to get that reference now? Damn it, I'm old. Wasn't the Xbox 360 like 20 years ago? Remembering what they asked him to do before the club meeting tomorrow, he opens the pack of ohagi and tries to figure out which one is Rena's, picking the obvious odd one out and taking a bite, then suddenly freezing as he bites down on something unusually hard. He spits and sees, oh no, that's blood, and then proceeds to pull a sewing needle out of his mouth. Ah, no! Bloody hell, man. That is absolutely horrifying, especially once he tries to dismiss it as a prank. I guess some sort of really mean practical joke, then realizing that no, that was not a prank. At best, it's an outright threat, and at worst, it is a direct attempt on his life. Had he swallowed that, he may well have died. But regardless, it also leads us right into our first tangent of the episode. So, this is actually one of my favorite bits of the first arc, as the idea of someone mucking with my grub is kind of a mild phobia of mine, and a needle, that's just so outright terrifying. But it's also one of those rabbit holes that Higurashi has a habit of sending me down. The needles in food thing actually has a kind of rich history as an urban legend. probably growing out of several incidents regarding concerns of deliberately contaminated, or I cannot believe I wrote this down, spiked food in the USA, with probably the most notorious incident being the highly publicized case of a man called Ronald O'Brien, who gave out poisoned Halloween candy in an attempt to cover for him poisoning his own son with cyanide. There are quite a few USA-based urban legends that have crept into Japan, so it might well be that, and if it is, it's definitely permeated, as I know that I've encountered the needles, poison, or broken glass placed in food tropes in manga before. As it pertains to the needle myth, from a cursory look around, the vast majority of cases have apparently turned out to be either hoaxes or extremely isolated issues with manufacturing, with the handful of others being mostly singular pranks gone wrong. From what I can tell, the only confirmed case of something like that was in 2000, which coincidentally is very close to when Higurashi was made, where James Smith of Minneapolis gave out Snickers bars with needles in them. I have to wonder if Ryukishi ran into this story in the wild and went, oh hell no. Japan is a bit harder to research, but from what I can tell, there was an incident where needles were found in bagged cabbage slices, but this may well have been an isolated manufacturing problem, and a recent incident where some absolute bastard left out dog food stuck full of needles. So yeah, I think Higurashi is probably referencing the Western legends more so than Japanese stuff, but it may also be something I am just not aware of. Maybe something local. If anyone knows, feel free to let me know in the comments. Anyways. The next day, Keiichi wakes after horrible dreams of slit-eyed demons coming to get him, only to be picked up by Rena. This is another genuinely unnerving bit of the manga, as Keiichi tries to play it cool and act like he's his old self as if his life depended on it, because, well, it likely does. And even now, you're never quite sure of Rena or Mion's motives. She seems normal until, you know what, I'll say it again. Best horror manga of all time, fight me. He is not 100% sure what to make of all of this. Was the needle an attempt at killing him, or just another warning? Another thing to note here is that, yeah, sometimes ambiguity is way scarier than straight up malice. If you find yourself with someone who is always openly hostile, you can either leave or take steps, but a friend or a partner who is intermittently great and loving, but then occasionally turns on you or becomes abusive, well, cue the married life lol am I right jokes, but seriously, it's far scarier. Mostly because, well, you aren't sure if they're going crazy or you are. And it takes some real writing chops to make that dynamic work. At school again, everyone seems like their old selves. Satako pranks him, Rika's being cute as hell, and Mion's teasing him. And yet, there's nothing he can do. His friends always seem normal until they start dropping subtle threats, or transforming into demons before his eyes. Keiichi realizes that his plan of just pretending things are normal was dumb. The village knows he's an outsider and knows he's been talking about Oyashiro and the murders with another outsider, a cop no less. He is marked for death and needs to proceed with that in mind. To quote one of System of a Down's best songs, those days are never coming back. And seeing him realize this is genuinely sad. Rika starts asking if he's okay, and on the verge of lashing out from sheer mental pressure and stress, he asks his friends to please leave him alone for a bit and stalks off. Now, This is where Keiichi starts making some bad choices. Well, more bad choices. But okay, it's a bit more complicated than that. The choices he is about to make do make sense, but they're also a bit dumb. Because the obvious choice would be, hey, Oishi, me and potentially my parents are in real danger. Please send like a few cops just to keep an eye on us. Maybe even just my house. You know, they have come and dicked with me there before. Maybe you'll catch them at it. But okay, there is definitely an argument to be made that he's acting in extremis now, and lack of sleep and general paranoia are making him twitchy and act illogically. Firstly though, to his credit, he considers telling his parents, or maybe just leaving, but he realizes that this would only get them killed. Or, you know, you just all leave together, find a motel, drive out of town, then tell the police everything you know. He finally settles on another plan. He will stick it out, wait for the villagers to make their move, and hopefully, with the benefit of foresight, he can avoid their attempt with some evidence he can take to Oishi. A desperate and frankly balmy course of action, but what the hell else is he supposed to do? Keiichi also resolves to find a weapon of some kind and, yes, alright, I will give him this, does one very, very smart thing. He writes a short note saying that people are trying to kill him and that it has something to do with Oyashiro-sama's curse. He takes the note and hides it behind a clock. Please remember that this note exists because it's responsible for something absolutely bananas that happens later on. Just a perfect moment. Way deeper into the manga. One more to the count, you'll see what I mean. Sure enough, as evening gives way to night, he makes his final preparations. He tells his parents that if anything were to happen to him, that they need to handle the clock in the hopes they find his note, and then he resolves to survive. Tomorrow, a life or death struggle begins. Him versus Hinamizawa. The next morning, Keiichi slips out early so Rena won't be able to walk with him and intimidate him further or make another kind of attempt. He marvels that such a beautiful and tranquil place could be hiding so much evil. As he walks, he becomes melancholy, realizing that his fun morning walks with Rena are now also a thing of the past. Before... Oh, holy crap! Keiichi almost gets frigging creamed by a K-van that attempted to run him down. He narrowly avoids it, but winds up in a ditch. You're lucky you didn't wind up taking over some generic fantasy world, mate. But what the absolute hell? Another warning? Or another attempt on his life? He isn't sure, but rattled and filthy, he continues to school. At school, he resolves to find something, anything, that he could use as a weapon if need be. Going through empty lockers when a metal baseball bat extremely conveniently falls out like something out of Condemned, clanging and clattering to the floor. Now, yes, I swear, I need to find an animator or figure out how to do a counter myself for these "this will be important" later statements, but he turns, startled, as a suddenly grave-looking Rika tells him not to lose the bat and implies that it belonged to someone really important. Huh? In another wonderfully iconic scene in the arc, and one of the few bits that I think the anime did better, Keiichi stands outside, practicing his swing, likely demonstrating to the girls that he is now armed and will defend himself if it comes to it. Oh yeah, this bit. So, the girls are actually quite taken aback by this. to which he's at least moderately vindicated, and they ask him what the hell he's doing, standing out in the middle of the sports field, aggressively swinging a bat, and he says that he's training to go to Koshien. Oh boy. So, this in brief refers to the National High School Baseball Championship, basically the biggest and most prestigious semi-professional sporting event in Japan. Some would say even more popular than actual league baseball, and it's been played on and off for over 100 years. Even simple participation can make or break attempts at a professional sporting career, and even beyond this, Koshien is kind of a huge deal and is televised nationally, as well as having a lot of manga, anime, and even video games made about it. It's just one of those very weird artifacts of Japanese life, and I don't know if there's anything analogous in the West. Japanese high school sports and the pressures placed on players, try saying that 5 times fast, even those not looking to go pro, is probably a topic for another video, but let's just say it's fierce, bordering on outright abusive at times. There have also been a whole ton of scandals resulting in team disqualifications, ranging from cheating to drug use, to more benign or very Japanese shenanigans like punishing a school by disqualifying them because a teacher got a DUI. I'm deadly serious. It's not terribly important, but it's interesting regardless. Keiichi's response here, that he's suddenly training for Koshien, would probably have been taken as kind of nasty sarcasm. It's like someone asking me what I'm doing with the brick I'm carrying around with me, and me saying that I'm saving up for a house. Regardless, he finds himself falling into his happy everyday rhythm with Rena and Mion before he snaps out of it, realizing that he was just happily smiling and laughing with a pair of people who are actively trying to intimidate him, but more likely kill him. And speaking of that, this bit. Oh man. So, he continues to do his thing before he realizes that someone is behind him. He whirls, bat ready, only to see a terrified-looking Rena hiding in the bushes. He angrily asks her what the hell she's doing, and she says that she's really worried about him, and also that she wants him to walk home with her today. What the hell is going on? Similarly confused and frustrated, he tells her to get lost, and when she doesn't, he starts swinging the bat around in a very threatening manner, and she begs him to stop, saying that she'll go away if that's what he really wants, but to please stop doing that as he's really scaring her. Or rather, the bat is scaring her. Jeez. He cannot help but feel a little bit bad at the evident distress he's causing his former friend, but cleverly, he squashes it, and as she walks away, she suddenly stops and drops an absolute bombshell. She asks him why he has Satoshi's bat. Hang on a second, what? That's Satoshi? I don't know why, but this moment, man, the atmosphere this manga creates, it's so good. But if you think that's weird, just wait. She continues talking, her back turned to him, saying that it's scary because one day, Satoshi started carrying the metal bat around with him, and at the same time, started not wanting to walk home with his friends. And then, exactly like Keiichi, he started standing in the middle of the field, swinging at nothing in lieu of practicing. Are we dealing with some kind of possessed bat here? But no. To his credit, Keiichi actually twigs on to what must have happened pretty fast. Satoshi, much like himself, realized that he was in serious danger and so began to take precautions, pushing his luck and hoping that her current attitude persists. Keiichi approaches Rena from behind, likely with the intention of getting some more answers out of her as to what exactly might be going on in Hinamizawa, and I guess maybe how he can protect himself. She continues talking, but trails off when she gets to the end of her story, about to say what happened to Satoshi. Keiichi presses her when she suddenly rounds on him, saying that he transferred schools and that she hopes that Keiichi is not also going to transfer schools. Yup, she's all transformed again, man. And this causes Keiichi to basically give up on this once and for all. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but he is now 100% on his own. Damn.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hey, you. Yes, you, Craig. Sorry, I'm pretty sure that someone called Craig just pooped themselves. Do you like horror? Do you like ghost stories? Do you, for some unknown reason, like falling asleep to or drawing to the sound of my voice waffling on about horror? What about me telling a ghost story? Well, if you do, then I guess there really is no accounting for taste. But I wrote a book and am currently both adapting and recording it for a sort of visual audio book. Okay, I need a better term for that. Regardless, over 4 hours, yes, you heard that right, 4 hours is available for patrons at present, and as we go, it'll be updated with the first batch of Mrs. Owl's amazing illustrations, and potentially more content later this year or early next. If you want to check the thing out, or, just support the channel, head on over to Patreon now. A subscription of as little as $5 a month will grant you access to not only the book, but also all sorts of other fun stuff like early videos, patron perks on the Discord, and more. Plus, higher tier patrons have extensive input on what series I cover, and what the hell else can $5 even buy you these days? Anyways, pluggity plug, pluggity plug. Back to the manga. Later, Keiichi walks home, alone this time. Rena, for whatever reason, didn't push matters and simply left him to his own devices. I'm guessing that it's due to the fact that he's now armed and demonstrated his willingness to use the bat like that. What was that anime called? Weird horror mystery thing where there was this ugly little kid that ran around attacking people with a bat, and it turned out the main character was summoning him like a damn tulpa or something. Yeah, old anime was drugs, people. Let me know if you know what the hell I'm talking about, because I half suspect I dreamed that. However, as he walks home, he begins hearing footsteps following him. Thinking that it must be Rena, he rounds, but sees nobody. Well, that's kind of alarming. He continues home, but all the way, he keeps hearing it. The sound of surreptitious footsteps belonging to some unseen pursuer. And yes, again, this is the manga's strength. It's building this tangible sense of menace and paranoia. And a big part of that comes down to how it's drawn and paced. I know that the burn is occasionally on the slow side, but it does allow us to really get sucked into the atmosphere of Hinamizawa, building the sense of pleasant everyday small town fun before everything goes off the rails. Still walking, still feeling, and still hearing something following him. Keiichi pauses from time to time to check. There's nothing but a palpable sense of something, some malevolent being following right behind him. And then, when he stops and turns around, it vanishes, but it's still watching. Now, beginning to completely freak out, he begins to wonder if he were to turn around fast enough to catch it, what exactly he would be face to face with, and if it's something he would even want to see. Well, that's very Masaki Nakayama, and is also going to feature heavily in my nightmares tonight. Sure enough, he stops at the door to his house, then shakily asks who's there. There's no response, but as he listens closely, he freezes when he hears the sound of something breathing. This causes him to totally bottle it, turn, and swing wildly, but as anticipated, hit nothing. Keiichi enters his home and not only locks the door behind him, but engages the deadbolts and then finally breaks down. Is he going insane? Is this just more mind games from the village? Or could it be that Oyashiro-sama himself is stalking him for interfering with his justice? Whatever the case is, he cannot take much more of this. And now, it is time for us to start building up to the climax of this arc. And trust me, it will not disappoint. An emotionally wrought and mildly collapsing Keiichi is startled when the phone begins to ring. It's his mother, and she has some rather alarming news. She and his father need to go all the way to Tokyo for an urgent business matter. And not only will they not be home tonight, they won't in fact be home until the following night. Well, shit. Now this may seem odd, and more something for the sake of narrative convenience, in order to allow the next few sequences to happen, but it's actually not terribly unusual in Japan for young teens to be left unattended, or even in charge of younger siblings for extended periods. Hell, as I discussed in Gantz, high schoolers or even older middle schoolers will sometimes live alone in rented apartments in order to attend the schools they want to, only returning home over the weekends, and sometimes not even that. It's a fairly complicated and nuanced discussion, but it's also one of those it is what it is because Japan things. Later, in a kind of gamey sequence, Oishi calls and asks what's happening, and Keiichi tells him about the needle. To which Oishi tells him that he hopes he hung on to it for the sake of evidence. That's a good question. Turns out that nope, he didn't. He just bunged it into the bin with the ohagi and thus resorts to looking for a needle in a trash stack. A needle in a trash stack? Really? Man, I need more sleep before writing these. But he actually gets quite frantic after a time, but no dice. He does write a note for his mum to ask about it when she gets home, and he then tells Oishi about the attempt at running him down. But again, it turns out that he completely humped the chicken, not having taken note of the license plate. And yes, K-vans and K-trucks are a dime a dozen out in the country. Oishi says that it can't be helped because, yeah, not anyone's first instincts when doing a John Woo dive into a nearby ditch is looking at the license plate and, okay, yeah, Mr. Detective, this is when you send over the heavy squad to watch out for him, right? Right? I mean, we now have at least 2 actual attempts on his life. But yeah, midway through their chat, Keiichi hears the sound of his doorbell downstairs. He ignores it at first, but whoever it is begins spamming it like crazy, and because, yeah, sometimes he is stupid, Keiichi tells Oishi to hang on and then heads downstairs to check who it is. At least bring the phone! I will say though, the art does really somehow manage to capture just how ragged and psychologically destroyed this young man is becoming from his ordeal. It's one of those subtle things that really does add a little something extra to the manga. One of those, to quote Mr. Plinkett, you might not have noticed it, but your brains did details. Just high quality all round. He opens the door. Of course, it's bloody Rena. And yeah, I won't lie, this next bit is terrifying. But also, as with so much of this arc. Sing it with me, folks. You should all know the words by now. Keep it in mind for later. But anyways, this sequence, man. Let's take a look. Rena, of course, is, despite looking normal, at least initially, acting full-on freaky now, resulting in an incredibly tense encounter with Keiichi, with him trying to pretend to be normal, but at the same time attempting to persuade her to leave, and her trying to manipulate her way into the house, first gently, then increasingly forcefully. She tells him that she's actually brought dinner for him, and this is almost effective at making him relax his guard. Could it be that at the moment Rena does actually care about him? But then he clicks that, wait a second, how the hell did she know he would be home alone? And from here, things go banana-shaped at high bloody speed. He says that his mother is making dinner, to which Rena's demeanor abruptly changes and she begins to demand to know why he's lying, becoming more and more insistent. Worse yet, she correctly guesses what he was going to eat for dinner, a specific type of instant ramen, and when he asks how the hell she knows that, she tells him that, well, she's been right behind him the entire time. Yeah, you know that detective you've got on the phone upstairs? A lot of things could, right now, get much simpler if you had brought the phone down quietly and let him listen to this lot. And yes, I know a lot of these videos will be me gushing over the art. It's not Blade of the Immortal or Maid in Abyss, but damn it, it is just perfection. I mean, this entire sequence is just awesome double spread after awesome double spread, and trust me, it's even better in print. But suddenly, tired of their little stalemate, Rena sticks both of her hands into the crack of the door and begins trying to force it open. Oh no, this sequence is too much, man. It is excruciating to watch. Keiichi actually responds very intelligently, slamming the door hard onto her hands repeatedly, just smashing those things, despite her begging him to stop, apologizing if her practical jokes have gone too far. Ah, damn it, this manga man. Badly injuring her and forcing her to let go. Then, she stands outside of his door, apologizing repeatedly in a creepy as hell deadpan voice, while he listens in abject terror until, unable to take any more, flees upstairs. There, Oishi, still on the line, warns him that the phone calls are coming from inside of the house. No, wait, different story. He warns him about Rena, and, okay, her true name is Rena, and it was changed due to an incident of violence in another prefecture. The windows, right? Nope. It turns out that she assaulted 3 male students with a metal bat, beating them almost to death and leaving one with permanent disabilities. The victims refused to even speak about it and wouldn't press charges as they were terrified of something. But they did say that they remembered something happening to Rena before the attack. She seemed to transform into something demonic. Yeah, dude, I hope those cars are already speeding to Hinamizawa, because seriously, Oishi, you're kind of the main villain of this arc. But now, this is interesting. Rena was institutionalized for a time after the attack, and the psychiatrist described another incident where Rena said that she was possessed, and that this possession was her punishment for abandoning the village. Oh crap. And yeah, reading this again, I do have to wonder if Rena/Rena's backstory is a nod to the infamous Boy A case, and I guess similar cases involving serious violence or even murder committed by youths in Japan in and around that time, with it being one hell of a hot button issue. Initially I thought of Girl A, but that was actually shortly after Higurashi was released. So yeah, real life imitates art sometimes. There's another example of this, but that'll come up right at the end, because it is wild, but would also be a huge spoiler. Regardless, Google Boy A if you want, but in Japan, especially during that era, young offenders could all but get away with murder, and at times did exactly that. Prosecuting them was a nightmare, and even if the prosecution was successful, in even the most extreme cases, for instance of serial murder, young offenders would be sent to a reformatory. I think I covered this in more detail when I talked about Satogashi, but TLDR version, forget Shamo. Most of these were pretty cushy, and after a time, we're talking a matter of years maximum, these offenders are then relocated and released, with strict anonymity being maintained for the offender and their family, and often a name change is involved. So yes, the Rena/Rena thing sounds a bit far-fetched, but it's not too unbelievable. Keiichi himself says that he sensed something really off around town, and is likely about to tell Oishi about the horrible breathing presence that's been stalking him, when a massive flash of lightning turns his room into a negative, and as the rain begins to pour down outside, he peers out of his window, seeing a shape illuminated by the flashes. A drenched and bloodied Rena is standing outside, unmoving, staring up at his room, still repeating the phrase, "I'm sorry," over and over again in that demented voice. Keiichi drops the phone, hanging up. Holy crap! Before we enter the final segment of the arc, we get another bit from Berncastel, the narrator from the start of the story, basically outlining that the truest sin is the ignorance of sin. And this actually won't make much sense in the story at all, really, but bizarrely enough, it'll make an enormous amount of sense in Umineko, which raises three possibilities at this junction. Either Ryukishi had that Leviathan planned out already, it was such a cool quote that he wrote a manga just to use it, or I'm just not seeing the connection here. Oh, and this next bit, bloody hell. The climax begins with us getting a plain white backdrop with a discarded photograph at its center. It's from the festival, showing Keiichi and his friends looking extremely happy. And yeah, anyone who has read, a story before knows from this that there is only one way this can all end, and that ending is not going to be good. It's like seeing the characters all happy and chatty at the start of a found footage movie. It wouldn't be found footage if they had made it. Anyways, the next morning Keiichi is almost too scared to leave his home. But wisely or unwisely, he resolves that the only way out is through at this point. He's going to go to school, and when they make their move, he will hopefully be able to figure out what's going on conclusively, escape, and take that to Oishi. On the way, he runs into Rena. She doesn't speak with him, and her hands are just a wreck, but he realizes that, unlike previous days, he feels absolutely nothing. He also runs into Mion, who comes right at him, telling him that whatever he is doing with the baseball bat, he needs to knock it off right the hell now, saying that it's not his bat. Her reaction here is something else to note for later. Things escalate fast, with him saying that he knows enough about what's going on to not trust her, that they won't find him as easy meat as they did the bat's previous owner, and then tells her to basically get bent and that he never wants to talk to her again. This causes her to abruptly break down in tears. Damn it, this manga. But again, Keiichi realizes that it doesn't bother him one bit. This has all gone too far now, and he has been threatened and hurt far too many times to care in the slightest. It turns out that, yeah, he wasn't wrong, as she reveals that she knows it's Oishi that's put him up to this, and in her demonic voice, she says that she is going to kill him. School is uneventful, and he heads home after, only to run into Rena, this time carrying her nata. She says that she is going to use this to get something out at the dump. But when he says he doesn't believe her, she begins laughing and, oh yeah dude, time to run. She's gone full Doki Doki, which to his credit, he does, with Rena in hot pursuit, looking even more demonic, now saying that he should speak with her. If he'd spoken with her earlier, perhaps Satoshi wouldn't have had to transfer schools. Eventually, Rena corners him, and, as per what he said earlier, he tries to get her to tell him what the hell is going on and who exactly is responsible for all the deaths. Yeah, no, this is another amazing panel. She responds by saying that it's Oyashiro and that he decides all, and then appears to start transforming into something even more unpleasant than before, saying that Oyashiro will never stop following him, before she suddenly lunges in for the kill, nata raised. I guess he passed the QTE and was thus able to catch her off balance and shove her, then runs like hell, before a pair of villagers step out into his path. One hits him at full power in the stomach, and he promptly blacks out. Keiichi wakes up elsewhere. We eventually learn that he's been brought back to his house, by the way. Yeah, his parents are still out of town, and finds himself being tended to by Rena and Mion. He's taken aback. Why would they help him if the villagers' plan is to off him? And things get stranger when they say they've called the director. Wait, the damn director? The dead man? What the hell is going on? Suddenly, they tip their hand, as Rena grabs him from behind and Mion, speaking in her demonic voice and her face changing into something hideous, pulls out an ominous syringe filled with, oh that's gotta be something bad, and says that it's time for him to meet the same fate as Tomitake-san. Oh bugger. Everything begins to go strange. Their faces transforming into something yet even worse as the syringe, presumably full of whatever concoction made Tomitake rip his throat out, gets closer and closer. Keiichi begins to scream, with the world distorting around him. And then Keiichi wakens at sunset to the sound of the cicadas outside, and realizes that it must all have been a dream. Rena is waiting for him to help dig up the statue of the colonel down by the dump. He stretches, gets up, and then realizes that he's covered in blood. He looks down to see that Rena and Mion are sprawled out on the tatami mats in front of him. He realizes that he's holding his metal bat covered in their blood. They're both very, very dead. Mion is a mess of broken bones, and Rena's brains are visible. Yeah, seeing them approaching with the syringe had sent him into a fight or flight response, and he proceeded to beat both of them to death. Holy shit, this manga! Seriously, I am surprised that you are still watching this video and not just reading it yourselves. No matter how much work I put into doing a good job of narrating or making things visually engaging, this is so much cooler to read than listen to, man. A million times better. Keiichi begins to drift in and out of reality, unable to reconcile the truth, recalling how much fun he'd had in Hinamizawa and how little he'd liked his life before in comparison. It doesn't matter that it was him or them. He beat two of the people he loved most in this world to death and is now standing in his home, covered in their blood, with their lifeless bodies sprawled out in front of him. Also, note how the art is subtly changing, becoming rougher and almost staticky as Keiichi's mind is finally beginning to give way once and for all. Absolute bloody genius. But we are not done yet. Outside the window, he sees Irie and the van that tried to run him down. Yeah, they're coming to see if he's dead yet, and presumably to finish the job if he isn't. Keiichi resolves to survive, but if he doesn't, to blow the whole thing wide open. He adds to the letter that the director is somehow still alive, that the syringe here is filled with whatever killed Tomitake, and one thing that we don't get to see. He then pauses, and in another fascinating and frankly devastating art and even font shift, he says that no matter what, he truly did think of them all as his friends. Damn it, Ryukishi. Keiichi, bat in hand, tears off into the night, and as he does, after a time, he begins to realize that he can hear footsteps following behind him, getting closer and closer. Whatever that thing is, it's back, and this is probably going to be it. We experience a bit of a fast forward and re-enter the story later that night. Oishi gets a call and is astonished to hear that it's Keiichi, but it doesn't take him long to realize that something is very, very wrong with his voice. The young man is coughing and spitting liquid of some kind. Uh-oh. Keiichi tells him that the culprit wasn't a human after all, and that Oyashiro-sama is right behind him as he speaks. Oishi tells him to turn around, to tell him what he sees, but Keiichi says he can't. He just can't. Whatever it is will blow away the last drifting fragments of his sanity. Oishi then realizes why he's coughing, and sure enough, in a panel that I cannot show you, which unfortunately is going to be a recurring theme, especially as we get deeper into this manga, we see that Keiichi has been scratching at his throat, and has indeed succeeded in digging a large portion of it out with his fingernails. Before Oishi can do anything, Keiichi falls to the ground, bleeding out, and his last words are, much like Rena, just an endless sequence of apologies, spoken in a rotting, demonic-sounding voice. Damn, the epilogue itself is just as bonkers. We get what I think is a police report describing what they think happened. Keiichi lured two of his classmates to his house and then beat them both to death. There are signs of a struggle, but there are also anomalies. The house had been ransacked thoroughly, as if a number of people had been through searching for something. Behind a regular-looking clock, they found a note, cleverly concealed. However, for some reason, the note itself had been tampered with. Several lines had been torn out from the middle. We won't get to find out what those were for quite some time yet. However, we get to read the rest of the note in its entirety, interspersed over, this bit is where those, let's say those seasonal allergies start getting really bad again. Oh man. We see Satako and Rika being told what happened to the other 2/3 members of their club. Namely, that Keiichi beat 2 of them to death, then took his own life. Whew. Now, note this, and note this well. An absolutely inconsolable Satako is being held by a grave-looking Rika. A Rika who appears more resigned than anything. And she then says that Satako doesn't need to cry because they'll be able to see their friends again soon. Huh? That has either a very odd or very, very dark implication, Rika. Either that, or we're about to go pet cemetery on this sucker. Our final panel shows us another glimpse of Hinamizawa. Only here it appears to be unreal, fading to cross-hatching at the margins. And as we pull out, we see Keiichi's last wish, that someone finds out the truth of what exactly happened in Hinamizawa and why. And so ends the first arc of Higurashi. And yet, there are 30 more volumes of this sucker. And I'm sure you're all asking, wait, what? How on earth can there be more story after a large portion of our cast, including our protagonist, died in some of the most awful and horrific ways possible? Well, for that, you'll have to wait until next time. Or better yet, go and read this thing yourself. Anyways, before we finish for the day, I just want to say a massive and heartfelt owl thanks to our fantastic patrons, without whom this channel would absolutely not be able to continue existing. Cheddar, Crazy, Lance Goebel, Question Man 6, Hunting for R2D2, Inuki Koji, John Knepp, Kel Kor, Callie Caris, Lee, Mootle, Opinion Custard, Philip Campbell, Piece of Yeast, Range Danger, Rose Montgomery, Sally Face, Wargle, Cheshire Quill, Endymion, Fluffy Burb, Hashtag Hermit, Hannah Hexchen, Jake, Catstown, Mew Haku, Nate Corbin, Oishi-bun, Rafferty, Sefit, Simone, Squid, Tac2M, William, and Yorgborg. And I'm sure that I have forgotten at least one person, so whoever you are, I am sorry. I also want to say an extra special thanks to our Owlbard patrons, Jathis, Uto, and Polite Crow. That's just so stupidly generous, I don't even know what to say. If you want to support this channel, gain access to a bunch of perks including my book, input on future manga to cover, early videos, exclusive videos, and all sorts of fun Discord stuff, as well as a few other things that I'm probably forgetting about, become a channel member or head on over to the Patreon. Otherwise, thanks for watching, like, subscribe, and all that good YouTube stuff. Cheers, take care, and I will see you all next time. This is the Owl, signing off.